and welcome to Inside Influence, the show where we talk to B2B marketing insiders to find out what's working and what's not inside the world of influencer marketing. I'm your host, Lee Odden, CEO and co-founder of TopRank Marketing, and today we're talking with the man, the myth, the legend, my friend from many, many years, Brian Solis. Now, of course, I'm sure you've heard of Brian, 8 times best-selling author, keynote speaker, digital anthropologist, futurist, and now global innovation evangelist at Salesforce. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Lee, it's always a pleasure to see you, man. I miss seeing you on the circuit, but anytime with you is time well spent.
Well, it's great to see you too. It's been a little while, and it's always a feeling of happiness when I get to see that smiling face and have a good chat with you. And speaking of chatting, let's get to it. So you're going to be coming up on a year in your role as innovation or global innovation evangelist at Salesforce in just a couple of months. And I'm curious if you could tell us about the work that you've been doing in that role. And of course, also what you're looking forward to in the coming year.
You know, a lot of what my role is, I'm sure, is what we're going to be talking about, which is the word evangelist at Salesforce means something deeper than simple evangelism, how we might think about it. It really gets to the core of what you and I have been talking about over the years, which is true influence. And influence is also something that we don't think about in terms of marketing. We think about it as adding value to people who need to make decisions about the future of their business, and therefore taking the insights, thought leadership, ideas, to help them do something in a new, different, or better way. So it's essentially bringing influence down to cause and effect. What is the effect, or what is the outcome that you want to see, and how do you share content, ideas, whatever package that is, to help that individual or help that organization move forward in ways that they couldn't have otherwise without hopefully seeing your work.
Okay, great. So I wanted to thank you for writing an introduction to the 2020 State of B2B Influencer Marketing Report, which of course was the very first dedicated report exclusively about B2B influencer marketing. And in that, you mentioned the need for, you mentioned that influence is always on. And I'm wondering if you could drill down a little more into that idea of always on influence.
Yeah. Actually, I'll drive there. You made me think of something that I didn't share in the previous answer
Mm-hmm.
because because it sounded so official, and what I think I want people to sort of hear is when we talk about B2B influence. Let's take out the how many followers do you have, or how many impressions are you going to drive, and let's look at it for what it is, right? A business, an executive needs help in these times of great transformation and disruption. And where do they turn for that? When there is not a playbook about building the future that doesn't exist, right? What do you do? Where do you turn? Who do you listen to? Right. And that's the role of someone who adds value to the conversation. Right? However that is, if somebody refers you, if you Google it, whatever it is, you're essentially building a community around people who are helping one another invent forward, right? To break convention or break mediocrity. And in that regard, and here's a little bridge to the question you just asked, which is influence never sleeps, because people are always in need of information. There's always something new. There's always something there's always a new opportunity. There's always a new way to do something differently moving forward. And so this is an opportunity to build an infrastructure within your organization that is constantly adding value to business customers as they seek it in a variety of contexts in their journey. So if we think about customer experience in the B2C world, one of the biggest transformations that I hope we'll see, at least I'm trying to make it this way, is we'll see organizations be always on and always connected from within, so that the back office and the front office then facilitates a much more intuitive, always on and personalized customer journey. The same is true for business to business. Business customers are going through that journey. There's different stages all the time, and they're always in need of insights, information, engagement. So that means the opportunity to engage, the opportunity to provide content, the opportunity to guide their journey is always on. So that takes influencer marketing, and it says maybe this isn't so much about influencer marketing as it is about influencer experience, that we can help that business customer at every stage because of the influence program that we've put in place is designed to add value. And so that takes the concepts of influencer marketing, content marketing, product marketing, and essentially creates this much more powerful alliance of ways of which we can think beyond, hey, how many views did we get? How many impressions did we get? What was the reach on that last piece of content we created? And then we can start measuring things by how many answers, how many questions did we answer? How many people did we drive towards this stage to want to know more? How did we change the thinking among executives and really start to get to a much more meaningful place where influence is essentially a code word for helping people out.
Awesome. In that introduction in the report, you also mentioned, and I love this expression, being the light in someone else's dark or chaos. And I'm hoping you can share an example broadly, or even at a category level, of how that idea translates into how B2B brands should be thinking about influencer engagement and outcomes, especially during a time of uncertainty like right now.
Well, yeah, these are interesting times, and to say it kindly. I want you to think about all the things that are happening in the world today, aside from COVID and aside from politics, because those, I think we feel all those things. Before COVID, or BC as I call it, we were already having sort of this confluence of challenges that were sort of subverted or subconscious in our relationships with personal technology. If anybody saw The Social Dilemma, you know what I'm talking about, which is the constant angst and anxiety and stress of being always on as an individual, reaching for that phone, the constant need to scroll, the constant need to share your own content so that you feel like you're relevant in this digital world, the constant need to be beautiful, the constant need to know the latest dance for TikTok, whatever it is, the pressure that technology has put upon us has been building up since, for a really long time, but I'd say it really accelerated with the dawn of the iPhone in the mid 2000s, and Facebook and Twitter, and then Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat. And every single one of those uses their own techniques to try to change your behavior and try to engage your attention more and more and more, because that's the commodity in which they trade. So that was already creating darkness. And that's also set the stage for this rewiring of how we interact through life, right? So it's not a coincidence that you have 60 tabs open on your browser at once. It's not a coincidence that you respond to every single notification that you get. It's called persuasive design. It's actually a series of design techniques that's used to just grab you. And we succumb to it. And the more that we succumb to it, the more that we actually wire ourselves for further distraction. None of this is good. So this is the stressors that's constantly happening from within that's actually largely unsaid or unnoticed. And if you're someone competing in the attention economy, which is basically all of us, then attention becomes a precious gift. If you can get someone's attention, knowing that they're doing all of these things, and you can grab it, what do you do next? And then next, and then next. And so being the light, I call it the ignite moment. It's something that I'll probably be putting some more narrative around in 2021. The ignite moment builds on some of my work over the years with Google back in the day, where we created micro moments. And micro moments were it was a mobile first sort of methodology that said, if you're on the small screen, you're going to have a fixed set of behaviors. And when you search or you ask a question, what happens next in that small screen, which meant that you had to create your customer journey from a search standpoint, to a discovery standpoint, to a content standpoint, to a series of micro outcomes that were much more intuitive and natural to that mobile first user. You extrapolate that and you say that the mobile first user isn't just using a small screen, they're incredibly distracted. They have short-term bursts. They'll be pulled away at any moment. So then it's not just about creating a mobile first journey, it's creating light. It's saying, wow, what I just found is exactly what I'm looking for. So now it essentially says we could do part of that through constructs, through landing pages, through the web team, whatever, but we really need trust. We need trust, and we need voices of trust, and we need content delivered in ways that allow trust to unlock. So it's micro content, it's micro videos, it's micro infographics, it's micro blog posts, whatever it is that when someone sees a peer that they believe that they can trust versus a brand, right? You leverage that trust through trusted voices, and that you get to construct a new customer journey for micro moments, but ignite moments where they're like, oh, that's exactly what I was looking for. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because they're going to feel it, because they don't get that everywhere else.
Wow. That so well put. Fantastic. A few years ago, we both worked, of course, much more you than me, with the influencer marketing platform called Tracker on the Influence 2.0 Future of Influencer Marketing Research Report. And at that time, and this is a couple of years ago, there was quite a gap between B2C and B2B influencer marketing adoption. Just intuitively, from your sense, do you feel like the gap between B2B and B2C is closed at all? Or do you feel like they're converging, or are they going apart? Or what's your sense of that?
You know, I don't have the data around me, but I got to
Right.
imagine that you had a big deal to do with closing that gap, because you've been a champion for B2B influence for a really long time now. You've been a pioneer in actually making this formal constructs within companies. And that report that we worked on was our way of not only showing the discrepancy between the two, but actually showing the need for them to be actually more similar than dissimilar. And Influence 2.0 is a concept that was introduced to help marketers think about influence differently than the way that it's still largely thought about, which is a broadcast mentality, or what I call drafting someone's social capital, which is this person has street cred within this industry, so we want to partner with them so that we can draft their credibility and attach it to our brand, which are all fine and all. But if you're adding value and consistently adding value through strategic partnerships, building trust, and also becoming an influencer yourself. I always believed brands needed to become influencers as well. Then we actually can forge an ecosystem, essentially a community, which is a community of belonging together to make that community stronger for one another and for the market. So coming back around to another point in your question, you know, I always joked that when I spoke to B2B audiences, I specifically loved to use the best B2C examples. And I mean, anything besides, you know, the traditional stuff where we see influencers getting free products and they put it on Instagram, and, you know, that's to me the same as celebrity endorsements.
Right.
I'm talking about influence as outcomes. Like, I trust you. I value what you're thinking. You're guiding me in my decision making, whether I'm a consumer or whether I'm a business customer. That's what I talk about with influence. And when I used to present to B2B, I used to find really great examples of B2C influence, which at the time was a smaller industry, which has now been massive. If we look at, for example, review sites, where all of these individuals who weren't anybody and now they're suddenly the foremost authority on headphones, you're going to watch what that person says. So I would show those types of examples all the time in B2B conferences, and everybody, even the conference organizers, used to say, stop. We want business to business case studies. So no, I want to push business to business forward to remind them that there are human beings on the other side of that screen. Right? If you can humanize something, then people will find it more relatable. It's not like as a business customer, they're not consumers. It's not like they say, okay, I'm done shopping for headphones, and now I have to look at B2B enterprise systems here. So I'm going to forget what it was like to be treated as a human being, and come into this speeds and feeds and sales and 18-month decision-making cycles. I actually think that humanization is what can make B2B even stronger.
That's fantastic. It's interesting that we manage influencer marketing for LinkedIn, in the LinkedIn marketing, LinkedIn sales solutions departments. And their approach is very much about humanizing the relationship with influential members of their community, or in partnership with those influential members of their community. So rather than asking, marketing and sales influencers about why people should use Sales Navigator or why you should advertise on LinkedIn and all the wonderful things that can happen, what they asked about was, what is the greatest challenge you had in your career and how did you overcome it? What are some of what are the moments of failure you've ever had, and how did you overcome it? Those sorts of things. And the storytelling that happened as a result was turned into content, and that resonated with the LinkedIn community so much more, thousands of percent more than other content programs they had done on the very same platform. So an example that proves what you're talking about. Absolutely.
Well, there's a key word there, which is storytelling. In fact, I did a really, it's an award-winning piece for LinkedIn several years ago with Gaping Void,
Yeah.
around what it means to be a storyteller. And this coming from a guy, when I was writing X, I found that a key part of experience design was actually storytelling. And I had come across a video, I can't remember his name, but it was called "You're Not an Effing Storyteller." It was just a very blunt video of someone talking about, just because you're telling a story doesn't make you a storyteller. And I remember seeing that, thinking, well, then what am I missing? And I ended up hiring Nick Sung, who was a former Pixar Disney storyboard artist, to understand what the artistry, I should say, of storytelling was. And it turns out that it's not telling a story. It's actually immersing someone in an experience that is completely relatable and believable. And it's something that is aspirational, that they can come in and through and out of different. And that was really powerful. And I share that with you because I think about it every single day when I create. I'm part of a team at Salesforce that I actually think is, if you had to assemble an all-star team of not just evangelists, but true market influencers, Peter Coffey, Bruce Richardson, Vala Afshar, Tiffany Bova, Matthew Sweezy. I mean, these are just Karen Manji. They're just incredible people that, whether they know it or not, are some of the world's best storytellers in the business realm, because they know so emphatically the challenges that someone's facing, and they're able to put narrative on top of it that helps them get out of that and moves them in a new direction that they could see and feel. That's powerful. I think that's, I learned from them, and I think I learned from the stuff you're doing too. I mean, you've been blazing the trail forward. I think we just have to keep raising the bar for people, and I think eventually B2C will learn from B2B.
Exactly. So, there's a lot of changes, a lot of decisions being made, not only because of the current environment, but also the time of the year. And I'm wondering what you feel are some of the strategic decisions that B2B brands should be thinking about when it comes to making influence a bigger part of their marketing mix.
It's just an easy question. You have probably many more answers than I can have here, because you and I.
Yeah, maybe it's more about the why. Like, why do you think
Yeah.
it's so much more valuable now.
I think it's more valuable now because people are, well, look, actually, I'll just be completely honest. Not that I wasn't honest all this time, but just straight. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
There you go.
I I shelved much of my narrative in March 2020 because everything that was happening in the world was not anything that I had studied before. As a futurist, which is, essentially scenario planning for certain future outcomes, or potential scenarios, I should say. I didn't have a global pandemic in any of my work, and I really didn't study the Spanish flu and all of those nuances either. So I had to really stop and listen. And when I stopped and listened, I I really found a new calling into how have customers changed in a variety of contexts: business, customer, consumer. How are they making decisions differently? What are they valuing? Um, and that the answers to those questions kept changing, just because we're all living in this pandemic and we didn't have the answers. We didn't know, how do you catch this thing early on? Can you go outside? We had all kinds of evolutions, rapid evolutions within this year alone, that it led to a lot of ways where I realized how I could add value to customers, reverse engineer that to businesses, to decision makers in whatever it is. Do we need to improve customer service? Absolutely. How do we need to improve customer service based on what they need? Well, they became digital first. When they became digital first as a result of shelter in place, here's what that meant. That means that service needs to be at this standard, sales needs to be at this standard, e-commerce has to be here, marketing now has to say these things. And they were all human-driven insights. And those human-driven insights, influence became a matter of connecting business strategy, business narrative, and business products and services, and then narrative, to people looking for those things, right? So that guided everything from business innovation to marketing to who those voices were, and they all had business outcomes, which meant influence had an immediate cause and effect. And so I say that because essentially what the why is because people are changing radically as human beings. So in consumers and business contexts, we now have to pay attention to what they're looking for, what they value, how they're making decisions, so that we can deliver the light as they're seeking it. And look, McKinsey data, I have it for the US in front of me, but I've also looked at it in every country around the world. And the US is actually on the low side of it. Countries like India and China are on the high side of it. So in the US, 75% of customers have already tried a new brand, website, or retailer since COVID.
Wow.
75%. That number is in the 90s in India. That number is in the 80s in China. And here's what is gnarly: 60% have said that they're going to stick with that new company post COVID.
Wow.
So that's on the low end too. That's the US number. So essentially what that data says is that loyalty is a thing of the past. You now have to re-up and re-earn that loyalty. Salesforce data shows that almost 90% of customers want you to be digital first. That an extraordinary number, somewhere in that neighborhood, now say trust is more important than it ever was. 31% have said that they now trust a company less based on their response to COVID. So essentially what you're seeing is a lot of chaos and turmoil. So the why to your question is now a matter of necessity, but also a matter of opportunity, where you can be, one, focused on retention, because if 75% are experimenting, you don't want to lose anybody. And also be part of the 60% where you can acquire based on that value, being the light.
So in our research, we found that 77% of marketers say that their prospective customers rely on advice, as you would expect from industry experts, but 60% say they don't have the skills or expertise in-house to execute on ongoing influencer marketing programs. And so what a lot of people are doing, of course, is they're relying on outside consultants, experts, agencies to help them out. So here's the question: What do you think B2B marketers should expect if they're going to go outside their organization for help when it comes to bringing influencer marketing and working with influencers into the marketing mix?
I I hope that agencies think of themselves as partners in trust building, uh, because that changes the conversation from marketing. It's part of the challenge is, what's the brief or what's the remit, and then how does someone respond to that? I think actually, for thoughtful organizations on the outside, you should probably consider influencing the decision makers as well, meaning that you should become an influencer in helping your customers understand that what they're buying from you is not just the ability to connect them with people who have a lot of followers or audiences or networks or a proven track record of content, but you're actually partnering with them to build a market of trust, to build a community, an always on community, because there's no I mean, when I research the decisions I need to make, it's at midnight. I need to I influence never sleeps, right? Because you have to find the things and the trusted voices when you can, and you want them to be recent. You want them to be relevant. You want them to be contextually relevant, which means I can't just find an article. Maybe I want data visualization. Maybe I need a video. Maybe whatever it is, right? I need to find it my way. So I actually think that it's an opportunity for agencies, partners, consultants to influence their buyers so that the briefs, whatever it is that they want, now start to ask for bigger, better things. I wrote, I think, the first industry report on digital influence back in the day,
Mm.
maybe 2011. And in it, I talked about authority and popularity. And what I see, especially in B2B, and we see it in B2C too, the authority part of this was always underappreciated. But authority essentially says, I not only know what I'm talking about, I know what you're going through. And so therefore, that's what's inspiring
Yeah.
a lot of my work. And therefore, I can hopefully earn your trust, because that's the consideration set that I'm bringing to the table. That's the work that external partners need to do to help internal partners who are caught up in everything that they have to deal with beyond influence, uh, everything that they have to constantly substantiate and try to justify, all of the work and the investments that they're making. Those things will become much more valuable within the organization if they can tie it to business outcomes, or to customer lifetime value, or to
Right.
things that actually have an impact on the business. Because I can tell you, after doing this for so many years, and after letting that, I didn't set out to become an influencer, but tying my work to those things, that's all a customer's looking for, is real help. And a business is looking for outcomes, and the two are mutually beneficial. So let's help those decision makers think beyond influencer marketing and more about influence.
Awesome. Well, speaking of influence, as you mentioned, you are obviously a highly respected and sought after influencer yourself. And I'm curious, can you share an example of one of the most rewarding engagement experiences you've ever had with a brand? Part of what I'm asking is, I think it's more important than ever for brands to not only think about the customer experiences they're delivering, but also the experiences they're creating when they work with influencers who ultimately become advocates for ideas that are important to their customers. So what's a good example of how a brand has delivered a great experience for you as an influencer?
Well, I'll tell you that, I mean, the ultimate answer is I joined Salesforce
Mm,
because that reason. It was essentially the ultimate partnership with a company that delivered incredible experience, but also empowers its employees, its customers, to break new ground, to blaze new trails moving forward. There was an analyst, I think it was Force, no, well, one of the analyst groups had published that one of the value adds of Salesforce isn't just the technology breadth and depth that it brings to a customer. It's the thought leadership that helps businesses see how to use technology in a way that makes their business better. And that quote was, to me, the ultimate validation, right?
Mm,
You want somebody to say that about your program, about how you engage your influencers to help businesses make better decisions that benefit the business and everyone associated with that. So that, I think, not mentioning other brands that I've worked with over the years, that's the one thing I was consistently looking for, was to be empowered to go have an impact.
fantastic.
Oh, and I'll just add, Lee,
Hmm.
beyond a campaign, right?
Yeah.
Which was, okay, we're out of money. Thanks, we did that. It was constantly making an impact.
So, we talked about this earlier in terms of these being uncertain and interesting times. Do you feel like, either from your experience as someone who is truly a thought leader around the idea of influence and also as an influencer yourself, do you think there's something unique that an influencer can contribute to a company, to a B2B company now during a time of uncertainty for customers, that is a bit of an advantage for the brand? Meaning that, it's maybe a loaded question. Are influencers an advantage more now than ever because of the uncertainty that exists and the importance of maybe trust and some of the other ideas that you shared earlier?
I think ultimately, yes. It's not that it's never not been important.
Right.
I do think that, in, not to use an overused term, but uncertainty, right? I mean, there's just a lot of uncertainty right now.
Hmm.
There's also a lot of fear, anxiety, stress, anger. And these are just natural human feelings that exist. These are things we're dealing with and coping, right? We're not just working from home. We're trying to work from home during a pandemic, with a whole bunch of other stuff like remote learning or whatever is in our households, right? So that importance of light that we talked about, the ignite moment, that's what's more important than ever. Add to that the digital distractions that everybody's dealing with. That's now compounded more because we have to be digital first. Those opportunities to deliver value and build trust are more important and actually more valuable than ever before. And so that's, I think, what we want people to think about here leaving this conversation is, if I had to reinvent my definition of influence and my approach to it because of 2020, what would I do differently? If I could set aside 20 years of work in March and start all over again, you can do it, because it only makes it more relevant and better. And that's ultimately all we want to do. And that's ultimately what people are looking for.
Great. Well, speaking of advice, one of the hottest areas of growth we've seen is, and you mentioned it, brands becoming influential themselves, but also the executives within those brands. And certainly they could hire people like you. But at the same time, many are making the effort to, increase the quality of the digital footprint that those executives have. So do you have any advice for, a B2B brand executive who's thinking about how they can become more influential as a person?
There are individuals that I think do a really amazing job within brands, whether they know it or not, that make that brand trusted and much more influential within the customer community. And talk to Paul Greenberg if you want to know who those are. Paul's a dear friend and an incredible godfather of CRM, an incredible analyst, but an incredible human being. And he empowers these individuals who feel like they want to change within organizations to go and change within these organizations, because they know it's what's right for the community. So I think that first part is caring. You're not just trying to be an influencer marketing and run an influencer marketing program. You actually care about the fact that customers are struggling to find information, and that they're frustrated because they can't get their business previously, or just couldn't previously do the things to make the impact that they really wanted to make. Influencer marketing, or influence in that regard, just becomes a means, a mechanism of which to activate a community. So that part is really about caring, and that's actually a rare gift out there. Uh, the the other piece is, somebody once asked me, this is years ago, what does it take to be a thought leader? And I thought, in the moment, and I just smiled. I said, well, you have to be a thought leader, and and
Thought.
and and that means that you have to actually, and it's tied to caring. You have to know what is happening out there, what people are struggling with, and you have to care so much about solving that, that is the heart of everything that you do. Then hopefully it inspires you to see a different path forward, of which becomes your unique voice. And then, of course, the mechanics of making that voice heard. But that's what, it's not just about how loud you are, or how you put fear into people, or how popular you get. It's really ultimately, at the end, what influence means is what impact did you have. And that, I think those things are where a business needs to focus, and where business leaders need to rethink what it takes to build that brand, that trusted brand out there.
Fantastic. This has been so good. I love chatting with you, Brian. I really appreciate your time. Um, of course, you've got so much more. You are a fountain of insights about anything digital and non, and in business. And I'm wondering where you would direct people to find out more about you, and about what you're thinking about the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. Uh, well, at Brian Solis is basically all of the handles, I think.
And we'll
Brian
link to
Solis,
those.
yeah,
Yeah.
briansolis.com is a good one. And also, if you want to do something about your social dilemma, I think this book is actually more important now than it was when it first came out.
It sure is. It sure
Uh,
is.
so I'd love to hear if you do take the journey to scaling your life, or life scale, uh, the impact that it's had on you in 2020 and beyond.
Fantastic. And we'll certainly link to that as well. Thanks a lot, Brian. Appreciate it.
Lee, thank you. I always love our time together.